Good evening, Scott.
I am trying to move my screen over to, I have two screens, so I can't, you're on my left and I want you on my right, but I can't get you over there. But
That's okay.
it works.
Let me know.
It's okay.
Hi, Scott. I want to welcome you to my podcast and YouTube live. I'm very excited to have you on my show. And I want to thank you for giving me your time and giving my audience your time.
You're very welcome.
And I'm really excited to hear more about your really sad story about your late daughter situation last year. Just to let you know how I came across you, I believe one of our mutual acquaintances, Professor Thaddeus Pope in Minnesota, has made me aware of your situation or your late daughter's situation. I've had Professor Pope on my podcast here as well a while ago.
Okay.
So, I think he's very prominent, obviously, in the space of medical futility, and he made me aware of your situation. I had not come across, your stories. I was very grateful that he reached out to me and made me aware. So then I obviously started reading your website. I think it's ouramazinggrace.net.
Correct.
Right. So then I started reading there and I watched some of your Rumble videos and I just thought, oh, this is very sad, but it's very interesting. But it's something that I've been writing about and making videos about for the last 10 years. We have had so many clients over the years with illegal DNRs. And, to me, it was like, well, finally someone else is talking about this, because I've been talking about this for the last 10 years publicly. And, no one seems to pay attention to it, but it's a real thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a very evil thing. I was not awake to any of this until after Grace died, and then I became, shortly after she died, I jumped in to share the story, and then shortly after that, I became a full-time activist and advocate and researcher, and I just had a situation today where somebody from a local hospital called their brother, a 56-year-old man with Down syndrome. They're going through the exact same thing as Grace. So I'm hopeful. I may end up being there yet tonight. Hopefully, we can save his life.
Right. Well, that's a very good point, Scott. I believe we have with my consulting and advocacy, we have saved many lives over the years by educating patients and families about their rights. Obviously, I've seen some of your material where you say, this is directly related to the whole COVID narrative. I don't know about that. However, what I can say, this was a real thing way before COVID.
Correct.
I think COVID just sort of, I believe, brought it more to the forefront because more people were affected by it.
Correct.
But it was a real thing way before COVID.
Yeah, that's what I have found out also. As I started digging, I saw this has been going on for, probably as early as 1900.
Probably. And the other thing that I find very interesting about, your daughter's case is you are actually willing to take it to court, or you have taken it to court already, from what I understand. Most families don't have the energy, the time, the drive to hold people accountable, which is what I believe you are doing. And that's, I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, it's huge. The time commitment it's exhaustive. It's hard to grasp how much time it takes. And then, so you're right. You need to have the drive, the energy, and you have to have an analytical mind, because the attorneys will never know the case like you do. It's impossible. They can't spend enough time. And then you also have to have the financial resources, because no attorneys are taking these on because there's no money in these cases. The states have put walls around these doctors with liability protection. So, there's no money. So we're using our own money.
Right. You're using your own time, money, resources with no guarantee for the outcome that you would like to see.
Correct. Right. In fact, you would think that we have the truth on our side, thankfully, but they're bigger than us by far.
When you say they're bigger than you, what do you exactly mean by that in terms of resources they can throw at this case, or
Correct.
what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So Ascension Hospital System has 30 billion in cash. So they can throw a lot at this case. I mean, we don't have 30 billion. I allocated 300,000 to fight this case. I mean, and it could go over that.
Mm. And do you think that this might be a long drawn out process?
We actually have a jury trial set already, so I don't think it's going to get long and drawn out. The judge set a jury trial for 3 weeks, starting November 4th of 2024. So just over a year from now, so we have a jury trial already set.
Right. And do you expect a verdict there pretty quickly, or do you think that might take weeks, months?
I don't know. I don't have experience in that realm. I mean, because we have the truth on our side. I mean, I'm optimistic that these jurors, it will be so obvious. But I mean, it's still a crapshoot. I mean, people are not awake. So I would say most of the jury is not going to be awake. So they are going to be on the side of the doctor going into the hearing the testimony.
Yeah, because their point of view might be, well, if it's a regular thing, why don't we hear more about this?
Correct.
On a day?
Right. Yeah, there's all kinds of. I mean, so there's so many wild cards. Because you have the truth on your side doesn't make it that you're going to win the case. I mean, that would presume that the judge, the court, the whole system is in pursuit of the truth. Well, the system, the way I look at it is we're submitting to man's system by doing this case. This is not how I would think a case would be heard. I mean, but it is the system in place, and it's a corrupt system. But what the benefit of submitting to that system is we get the story out in the press. And that's really what the goal is. The goal is to save lives and stop the behavior. So the press is our friend right now. We're definitely winning in the court of public opinion. I've been on 750 programs already.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. No, you definitely, I can see your name everywhere, but that's also because I'm looking in this space, obviously.
Sure. Right. And right. It's not everywhere outside of this.
It's not everywhere. It's right. Everywhere where I'm looking, but that doesn't mean it's everywhere.
Correct.
Scott, do you want to share? I mean, obviously I know your story. I have read about your story, but for our audience, do you want to share more about what exactly happened to Grace? I know you've probably told the story a million times, but to raise awareness, would you mind just sharing Grace's story for our audience?
No, that would be just fine. So what happened with Grace is, so first I'll just tell you a little bit about Grace. Grace had Down syndrome, and, having Down syndrome was a gift. When she was first born, I don't know how to deal with that. I'm just a dad, but I thought, I mean, we just God blinded us to the Down syndrome. So we just treated her like any kid. And so she did everything. And, I think Grace ended up being high functioning, partially because God made her that way, partially because we never vaccinated her with anything, and partially because my wife homeschooled her. And, and I homeschooled her too. I mean, she just participated in everything. She deer hunted with me. So today was a sad day. I was getting our deer stands ready, and Grace would typically be doing that with me. So it's not fun to walk through those things, but she would deer hunt with me. She played violin. She could public speak. She could read and write. She knew every state and capital. She knew every country and capital. I mean, she was, and on top of that, she didn't have the disease that you and I have, which is she's not judging everybody. She was just welcoming. She loved everybody. She was an encourager. And I mean, it was an absolute gift to have her. And on top of that, she was funny. She had quite a sense of humor. I mean, she would come up with one-liners that were really funny. So I'll give you an example. So are you familiar with the BP gas stations? I don't know that you would.
We do have them here in Australia too. The BP.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well,
we do.
Fits perfectly then, because one of the times that we were deer hunting together, it's kind of boring. You're sitting in a stand waiting for a deer to come. And so she said, "Dad, I have a joke for you." I said, "Well, what's your joke?" And she said, "Where do bees go to the bathroom?" I said, "I don't know. Where do they go to the bathroom?" And she says, "The BP station." I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, she made that up. I mean, that's pretty neat stuff. So, she would have been 21 years old a week ago, this last Friday, September 22nd. She would have been 21. So we celebrated her 19th birthday on September 22nd of 2021. And 3 weeks later, she was dead. And, it was, so what happened was I had, and, my wife too, I mean, we were prepared for COVID. All right. So at this point, I'm not awake to anything. I'm just a conservative that owns a business, and I have a healthy distrust for the government. But I think the hospitals are still a safe zone. In general, I think, the doctors follow the Hippocratic Oath, and, so I just am, pretty typical dad. So when we, just to flip forward, I mean, I think COVID right now is a complete psyop. It's 100% lie, all parts of it, which I can prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. I have thousands of hours of research now into this. And like you and I were talking, this really, COVID just exposed it. COVID woke me up. Grace's death woke me up. But then when you start digging, you realize, I mean, this thing has been going on for a long time. They codified it in Obamacare. They implemented it with training documents. So they've crossed every T, dotted every I to pull off this whole psyop of COVID. But anyway, so at this time though, so this is October of 2021, we believe Grace has COVID. And we believe that because we bought a home test, we tested her, she tested positive. And so we didn't think anything of it because we just thought, well, I mean, we're just going to walk through it. We have ivermectin, we have vitamins. And so Grace started that protocol. But one of the things that we started measuring was her oxygen saturation. And we were following a protocol that said, if your oxygen saturation drops below 94%, admit yourself to the hospital. And the morning of October 6th, her oxygen dropped to 88%. So we perceive that as an emergency. As I see it today, that wasn't an emergency at all, because it is normal that your oxygen drops when you have a cold or flu. So, we really had no business even monitoring her oxygen because we had no baseline. But, so we were blindly following another of man's ways, right? So, the hospital is man's ways, but we were following another group of doctors that didn't buy into the COVID narrative, but they still were programmed. And, just a quick sidebar, I have my own podcast now. It's called Deprogramming with Grace's Dad. Well, it's called that because, the single most important thing I've learned since Grace's death is how programmed I was. And, I still am. I mean, I don't think you can ever be deprogrammed 100%, but it's a process, and you start realizing you were lied to. And, so once you realize you're lied to, you start realize, okay, well, what else was I lied to about? Well, then, okay, that too. Well, what else? And what else? And what else? And you keep digging, and that's what I've been doing. And, I have now come to the conclusion that, and I can, again, I like researching, so I can prove these things very easily. I don't make claims without proving it. And medical murder is, in fact, the number one cause of death in the United States. And it's by design, period. I just started a podcast series on that particular topic. But anyway, now we go back to October of 2021. I took Grace to the urgent care. They suggested taking her to ER to do a CT scan of her lungs. That came back negative. The ER physician suggested checking her into the hospital for 3 or 4 days, put her on oxygen and a steroid, and then she'll be home. And so I thought, well, that makes sense. And if they would have only done that, Grace would be alive. So if I would have never taken Grace into the hospital, she'd be alive. If they would have never if they would have only done what they said they were going to do, Grace would be alive. But they didn't do that. I was with Grace from October 6th until the 10th. I was taken out by an armed guard on the 10th. We then hired an attorney to negotiate with the hospital attorney to get my daughter Jessica in as a replacement advocate. And my wife couldn't do it. My wife's name is Cindy. She couldn't do it at the time because she had COVID. So now Jessica was in the, with 47-hour gap. So what happened during that 47-hour gap? Well, now that we've got actually we don't have all the records, but the records that we have, we see that on October 9th, the day before I was taken out of the hospital, they started Grace on a sedation med called Precedex. And during the 47 hours we didn't have advocacy, they increased that dose, the dose of that med 6 different times. Well, Precedex, if you look at the package insert, it says it causes acute respiratory failure if you use it for more than 24 hours. Well, they had Grace on it for 4 full days when we turned the page into her last day on Earth. And if you looked at her death certificate, you would see it says acute respiratory failure with hypoxemia as the first cause of death. So in fact, the hospital caused the first cause of death by using Precedex beyond the 24-hour rule in the package insert. But the second cause of death they listed was COVID-19 pneumonia. That is a flat out lie. And they do that because of the financial incentive for listing it on the death certificate. And what happened instead is that I'm giving you a relatively short version of the story, of course. I could talk for 2 hours about the details of the story, but I want people to have a perspective so you can see how egregious this is. But a better perspective is to realize a story like this is one of 1.2 million that happened in the United States during the 39-month COVID era. So Grace's story is not an anomaly. It's not a one-of. It's like, oh my gosh, so our lawsuit is really representing 1.2 million families who lost loved ones. So now what was the second cause of death? Well, the morning of the 13th, the doctor called my wife and I, and his purpose of the call was to ask us for a pre-authorization to put Grace on a ventilator just in case. And so he said, well, these type of things tend to happen in the middle of the night when you can't get a hold of the family. We'd like to have your authorization just in case. Well, I had researched ventilators by this point and knew we weren't going to approve that. I mean, they kept pressing it. And so now after the fact, of course, I realized why did they press it is because the bonus and combined with the amount of money the hospital receives from insurance and everything else for the average amount of time somebody's on a ventilator is 22 days. They have about a $300,000 payday. So that's why they're pushing this ventilator, even though it has a 90% kill rate. So we say no. And he immediately switched gears and said, Grace had such a good day yesterday, which, unbelievably, she did have a good day in spite of being sedated. So he says, let's work on nutrition. So we can get Grace out of bed, get nutrition, and so she can get moving and be out of here in the next 3-4 days. So we thought, boy, this is great. So we approved a feeding tube. While we were on the phone with him, he increased Precedex to the maximum allowable dose. Simultaneous with hanging up the phone, he put an illegal do not resuscitate order on Grace's chart. So, and before, remember he said, let's get her out of bed. Well, before we even got on the phone with him, he had strapped her down to the bed and made her poop in the bed. So, it's just, it's a complete lie. So
strapped her down to the bed, like you mean like restrained?
Correct.
That in and of itself would be illegal.
Well, I agree. There's so many things. This has become the norm. They look at people who are they look at all people as a number, but especially people on Medicare and Medicaid, they're a drain on our society, and they bought into this lie. And so Grace was on Medicaid because she was disabled, and it's and Down syndrome is frowned upon. Down syndrome people are aborted at the rate of 90% in the United States right now. So it's already programmed that these Down syndrome people are they shouldn't be around. So, so what they did next was they combined Precedex with lorazepam and morphine in a 29-minute window. And that combination would have taken you and I out, Patrick.
Of
And,
course.
in a 29-minute window, that's what you do when somebody's in their last hour of life in hospice care. So then, of course, because they intended to kill her, once it came time to realize, okay, Grace is going downhill, Jessica called Cindy and I panicking, saying, Dad, Grace's numbers are dropping like crazy. So we said, get the nurses in. She said, I've been trying. They refuse. So we started screaming to the nurses, save our daughter. And they hollered back from outside the room with a guard present, she's DNR. So we have no idea. So we holler back, she's not DNR, save our daughter. But they refused. After they gave Grace morphine, no doctor or nurse even came in the room. So, I wish this story was the only one, but this has become the excuse. I mean, this is Grace's story is unique for a lot of reasons. She had Down syndrome was one. This combination of events wasn't the typical way they took somebody out with COVID. Usually they were using remdesivir and a ventilator. But the other thing is we were in the room other than 47 hours. 99.9% of the people have no concept that their loved one was murdered because, the loved one dies. The doctor calls, said, hey, Uncle Jim just passed away. They put COVID on the death certificate, and unbelievably, the family gets a check courtesy of the United States taxpayer for $9,000 to cover burial expenses. So, so there's a complete cover up.
We're incentive. Death was incentivized from COVID, basically.
Correct. And so, we never took the money, by the way, Patrick, because
I saw that in your latest. I saw that in your latest email newsletter. I saw that.
So anyway, that's the short version of Grace's story.
And just from a medical point of view, Scott, before she got intubated, she was on BiPAP.
She never was intubated because we never approved it. We never approved it. Grace would not have died on October 13th if we approved a ventilator. She would have died 3 weeks later because that would have maxed out the payout.
Wow.
So she was on a BiPAP, which, now that I know what the deal is with the BiPAP, she never needed a BiPAP either. But they create this environment, where they're above you and you're supposed to bow down to them, and they create this fear, and it is a weird thing. I mean, I would not fall trap to that again for sure in a hospital setting, but I can see very clearly how people fall trap to it.
Of course. One thing that I sort of keep saying to our audience and to our clients is the hospitals are very good at pretending they can do whatever they want, and they will if you let them.
That's spot on, Patrick. And that's key. People, for somebody that, people always ask, what's the most important thing somebody could do to survive a hospital stay? And I say, change your belief, because if you believe it's safe, you will not, you won't be prepared. If you believe that they're going to take your life if they have the opportunity, now you'll be prepared.
Absolutely. So just for me to piece the puzzle together here as well. So you are saying they were giving her this mix of lorazepam, morphine, and Precedex, and that's when they intubated her?
No, she never was intubated.
Oh, she was never
intubated.
See, okay, I missed that. Okay, I see. Of course, yeah, she would then stop breathing.
Yeah, she stopped breathing from that med combination. Right.
Of course. Wow. Yep. Wow. That's even more heinous than I thought it was.
Well, it's interestingly, because it's still I'm in shock, and the next morning I talked with the doctor who did all this, because I didn't realize she was murdered at this point. I just said, if we would have approved a ventilator, would that have helped? And he said no. So I mean, he was honest, but I mean, he actually, if he was completely honest, said he would have said no, because the goal was to kill her. But of course, a ventilator wouldn't have helped at that point, because the med combination was put in her to kill her.
And how much do you think at the time, it was October 2021, COVID was still running rampant and whatnot. So the ICU would have been full, would have been very busy. There would have been a shortage of beds, a shortage of staff, shortage of resources. Is that something you picked up on at the time?
I never saw a shortage of staff. So that's an interesting thing. But I did do a dive into the numbers. And the fact is that hospital was at maximum capacity the day Grace died. They did not have a bed available. So that really is the smoking gun relative to motive, because turning that bed is, when I shared this with my wife, when they're at 100% capacity, they received $13,000 for killing Grace. And so then she said, Grace was, and she's right, Grace was worth more dead than alive, because they needed to turn that bed to get a higher paying patient from the ER to take that bed. Of course, that's my speculation, you realize, but I mean, it doesn't take a lot to connect the dots here.
Yeah. Scott, one thing that I've noticed when I, read your email newsletters and watch some of your videos, you mentioned that you were particularly disappointed as well in the nurses. I'm a nurse by background, and I'm a registered nurse. And I heard you saying, the nurses should be standing up for their patients. And I totally agree with that, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? But I just wanted you to comment on that, because I think that was one of your biggest disappointments, where you felt, well, the nurses on the bedside, they should be standing up to the doctors and saying, hey, we're not doing the right thing here for Grace or for any other patient. And that was a big disappointment for you, which I can totally understand. And, that's one of the reasons why I left the system, because I just felt like, hang on a second, I can no longer do what I feel is right.
Well, I'm impressed that you left, Patrick. I mean, that tells me you're a man of character. So that's really impressive. The paradigm has changed with nurses. So it used to be the nurse was the last line of defense. And so the nurse, it would be like, she could stop it. She could stop the process. And so she was the last line of defense. So in the old days, and it wasn't all that long ago, I would say in the last 10 years, this changed. The nurse was an advocate. Well, now she's become an accomplice. And the excuse, and I'm going to tell you two anecdotal stories, because it will show people what a nurse, where they're at today. So one happened well over a year ago. Wisconsin Christian News did an article on Grace's story, and a nurse happened to live next door to the reporter who wrote the story, and she called the reporter and said, that man is lying, and specifically that I was lying about the DNR. And so then this is probably 3 months ago now, that same nurse called the reporter and said, he's not lying. She said, I'm a nurse at another Appleton hospital, and I'm the power of attorney for my dad. And I was checking his chart, and the doctor put an illegal do not resuscitate order on my own dad. And I'm the power of attorney, and I'm a nurse. And so the reporter called me. I said, do you think that this lady will talk to me? And she said, I think so. So she brokered the call. So I talked with this lady, this nurse, and she explained the story. And I said, will you come on the radio and podcasts with me to share this? I said, people's lives are on the line. And she said, no, I can't do that. I'm a year away from retirement, and I can't jeopardize my job. Then and another situation is, so this lady was 66 years old. My wife and I rescued a disabled man out of a Green Bay, Wisconsin hospital in November of 2022. So a little over a year ago. In fact, I just was texting with him today. And when we physically removed him out of that hospital room with his power of attorney sister and his mom, got him out. And when we had him in the wheelchair and ready to go, the nurse was in the room. And I said, I may never have this opportunity again, so I'd like to ask you a question. And I said, they were going to kill Robert. Robert already had 6 doses of remdesivir in him when we rescued him. I mean, when I got to the hospital that morning, he was almost dead. And so I said to her, they were going to try to kill him. I said, you don't have to acknowledge that. But what I'm curious is why would you go along with it? And her answer, I don't think it will shock you because you're awake, but she said, I'm from the Philippines, and if I don't do every single thing that they say, they'll ship me back. So that's where nursing is today, folks. It's not a joke. I mean, it's the paradigm has shifted. These people are, you think, I mean, you can't wrap your head around it. You can't think that, people are that evil that they're going to take another person's life. But that's where we're at.
Scott, why do you think we are seeing what we're seeing? Is it an erosion of Christian values, of morality? Why do you think we're seeing what we're seeing? What's your theory there?
That's my favorite topic. We're seeing this because, well, of course, there's an erosion of Christian values, but where do Christian values come from? Christian values come from Christians, and there's very few Christians. So what the reality is as a society, we've rejected God. So, God has principles that he follows. I mean, when you reject him, he disciplines you and he judges you. And, I believe that's what's going on. I mean, Satan, Jesus said Satan is the prince of this world. So, I mean, we're seeing that alive and well. If you didn't believe it before, I mean, believe it. We are in a literal antichrist system. We've been in that for, thousands of years. But I mean, the second law of thermodynamics, the boiling frog, the slippery slope, all of that, you don't realize it's happening because it happens so slowly. But then all of a sudden it does happen. So, I mean, it's from all angles. So look at the public school system. Okay, so I would prefer to call it the public fool system. So back when I went to kindergarten in 1968. So so I found a document in 1967 about the plan to depopulate the United States. So I go to kindergarten in 1968. In 1969, the electric can opener was invented. And so I'm just a kindergartner. They give us the weekly reader. And you see in the weekly reader, they say, if your parents own an electric can opener, that's wrong because they're using energy and there's not enough energy. Okay, so just realize what's going on here. They're programming a little kindergartner's mind. So either God's got this or he doesn't, right? So when God said, be fruitful and multiply, I don't think he's surprised that there's 8 billion people. I don't think he never sent an amendment back. So, I mean, we've got the original language. Okay, be fruitful and multiply. Okay, so then that means there's enough resources, right? So they lie about the resources. So now that's the climate control agenda.
Narrative. Yeah.
Then the next thing they said was in the same weekly reader, it's irresponsible to have more than 2 children. So now we got so now take that to today. That's the population control agenda. So, this stuff, Satan is playing a long game. And, the people implementing this, some of them have sold their soul. Some of them don't even realize it. Right. So think about a lot of the medical people, they're programmed to just bow down to protocols, standards of care. They just think that's they went to medical school and these are the standards of care. And so you just follow the standard of care. That's what you do. Okay, well, what if the standards of care are written by Satan? Do you still follow them? But if you've been programmed for so long, they become a cog in the wheel. This is the same exact thing that happened during World War II. You had so many people in on it, but a lot of people don't even realize what they're doing. And the same thing is happening today, but it's worldwide this time. It isn't just unique to Germany. It's a worldwide Holocaust. And, it has the original exposure of the Holocaust of the eugenics agenda. in modern times, the United States is the inventor of the eugenics agenda. So Adolf Hitler adopted the United States methods, then took it further. So instead of when we publicly renounce eugenics when Adolf Hitler adopts it, but instead of what did our feet show? I'm talking about as a country. Our feet showed, no, we can't. I mean, this is important. So let's sneak 1,600 of the best eugenic scientists from Germany to the United States so that we can keep this going. And boy, did they keep it going. So when you see somebody today, I just wrote an article on this that I submitted this morning, and I'll just quote from that. If you hear somebody today say that COVID, the implementation of the solution for COVID, the jab, all that was a mistake. The lockdowns were a mistake. The jab was a mistake. Okay, watch out, because I see when people say that, they're controlled opposition, because it was a complete success, because that was the goal. The goal was to see where are we at as a population? Will people be dumb enough to wear masks? Will people be dumb enough to buy into the propaganda? And okay, so now we did our test run. So now we're ready to go. So I mean, it was a successful test run.
I agree. No, I agree with you, Scott. It was a test run. How compliant are people with lockdowns, with vaccine mandates? It was a successful test run. I agree with you. And we only have one. We have to blame ourselves. We are the ones responsible. We let it happen. And it's up to us to not let this happen again.
And the only way, this is great that you're letting me ramble with this, because, what I see happening is, well, people, I just call it the patriot group, that, we're not going to let this happen again, which of course we don't want it to happen again, but how we get there is more important than what we do. And how we get there is that we have to acknowledge that we rejected God. And so once you acknowledge you rejected God, that means repentance is the next step. Well, now we can stand firm. But standing firm without repentance is still relying on man. That doesn't do anything. So anyway, that's
it's look, no, Scott, it's very interesting what you're saying here, because a lot of the people and our clients that we work with one-on-one, a lot of the things they're saying are things like, well, the doctors want to play God, but it's not up to the doctors to play God. It's up to God to guide me to what is happening here, right? So you are absolutely right that, we are rejecting God as a society. We are having people in high places, if you will, like doctors, nurses. I believe they are in high places. They are in life or death decision-making places, and they're trying to play God, and they're creating a narrative that's very dangerous, very slippery slope. I'm not sure what you see in the US. For example, here in Australia now, we have some states that introduced voluntary assisted dying laws. Have you heard of that? Like voluntary euthanasia?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I mean, that is, of course, going on in the United States too, but it's
right.
What the United States does. I mean, it is interesting. They, as a rule, we hoodwink our population to think that we're the best country on the planet. We're the light on the hill. All this it's all BS, because we're the inventors of all of these shenanigans. Obamacare, Section 1553, legalized euthanasia, legalized assisted suicide, legalized mercy killing. So, I mean, don't be thinking that, we're ahead of the game. It just, we project our sin to all these other countries instead of realizing, well, it's on purpose. I mean, they're projecting the sin to keep the population blind. So sure, this is all in the governor of Hawaii in June passed a law because not enough people were being euthanized. So now the nurses can issue the meds to euthanize a patient. So sure, I mean, of course it's happening in the United States.
That's madness.
Well, I mean, it's the goal, though. I mean, that's the thing. If people can understand that's the goal, it's really important because I see a lot of, it seems like there's a race to expose evil. So like when I say this thing about Hawaii, and then 2 weeks ago, they find out that the mRNA technology goes into breast milk. Well, no kidding, it goes into breast milk. What are you going to do about it? The reality is we've got to have the population know that that was the goal. This was not an accident. That was the goal. So once they realize that's the goal, and we got here because of rejecting God, now people can do what they're supposed to do, which is repent. If you think through what is the natural result of all this evil that's being exposed. Well, we're going to sue them. They broke, they're against they broke the Constitution. Yeah, okay, I get all that. Okay, but then the result of your lawsuit is going to be 3 to 4 years down the road. You may or may not win. So
and you've drained your resources along the way,
your time, your energy, your money, right? And you're playing it would be like playing poker, but the person you're playing poker with has 4 extra aces, and they can play them whenever they want. So I mean, you can't. It's a rigged game. So I think that where people should be investing their time is getting to know God. And I say that because I think, I say it just because I think it's right, but I think substantially worse times are happening. And just process this, Patrick. They have 80% of the people live in cities. Okay, they have control of the power. They have control of the food. They have control of the water. Okay, so you cannot protect yourself against a serial killer like that. There's no way. Only God can do it. So, I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but you're letting me ramble a bit, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah. No, look, there's definitely a much bigger picture. I mean, you and I started this call today really to highlight the issue around illegal DNRs and preventable deaths in ICU. And whilst that's where we started, there's obviously a much bigger picture emerging that you and I are well aware of, and I hope that our viewers are, becoming more awake to the bigger picture that was unfolding way before COVID. But COVID just highlighted this. Now, on a positive note, though, Scott, what I will say is this: with some of the work that we've done here, is we had clients come to us and saying, "Hey, I believe the ICU has issued a DNR here. We are not across it. What can we do?" And we have helped people going to court here in Australia successfully, and the hospitals had to take the DNR off within 24 hours. So there are ways of managing that, and we've been in the midst of it, right? But you have to see it at the right time. There's a little bit of luck involved, of course, that you find someone that knows what they're doing, including a lawyer. We are not a legal firm. We are clinicians. However, we do work with some lawyers that are excellent and that know what to do. But we have also found, Scott, whether it's in the US, because we're working with a lot of clients in the US as well, not many lawyers understand the area, and they shy away from it as well.
Great.
They are scared of taking on the hospitals or the hospital system. But we have seen it, that some lawyers can successfully challenge those situations with some clinical evidence which we can provide. So there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, and there's also some courts that will follow due process, and I hope that that'll be the case, in your situation as well.
Well, of course I do too, and you're right. I mean, it isn't foolish to prepare. So these things that you're talking about are right. Making sure that if you get in a hospital setting, you've got your power of attorney documents, your medical directives documents. Don't sign anything without completely reading it. Never give away any of your rights. Have an advocate. You're legally allowed to have an advocate. All those things, of course, those are no-brainers once you're awake, and those will protect your life. I mean, you also need immediate access to your electronic chart so that you can, with your phone or your laptop in the room, you've got to monitor your chart, because you have a medical directives form does not mean they're going to follow it. Believe me that, so you got to be on top of it. So you can still survive a hospital stay, no question. And you could have 100% survival, but it's because you took ownership. You turn none of your rights over to the doctor and nursing staff. You own 100% of every single decision relative to your care. And so if you've got that on your side, you will survive a hospital stay, no doubt.
Absolutely. And one thing that we always advise as well is, which is also not talked about enough, is to have an advanced care directive.
Correct.
Right. We're not talking about this enough, but, make sure if you're watching this and you want to protect yourself from, situations that we've talked about today, make sure you've got an advanced care directive in place. Clearly document and specify your wishes, what you want if you are in a life-threatening situation in a hospital.
Agreed.
And like you said, have your power of attorney documents in place. Very, very important. Get access to the medical records as quickly as possible, and be on high alert if they don't give you access to the medical records, if they're trying to delay. What is it that you possibly can't see?
All this stuff, it's like, it's funny, sometimes in interview stuff pops into your head, right? And so have you ever heard of the call girl principle, Patrick?
No.
So the call girl principle is the value of the service goes down immediately after it's delivered. So, as that applies to what we're talking about with the hospital setting, when you're ready to check in, don't check in until they grant you the electronic access, because once you're in, it's harder to get it afterward. So that's the idea of, you want to, it's like negotiating against an enemy. You've got to assume that they're not going to do what they said they're going to do. Just assume that. And if you assume that, then you'll protect yourself.
Absolutely. And, like I say, question everything. You need to question everything right from the start. Unfortunately, you are in a once in a lifetime situation that families just can't afford to get wrong. It's unfortunately your story highlights that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I sure miss my little buddy, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. But you're on a great way, I believe, to inform the general public, to wake people up, decondition them, and raise awareness of what's happening in the real world. We can't be blind to it.
I agree. That's why anytime somebody asks, I come on their program, because, there might be one person that wakes up because of hearing this, and it's worth it.
Absolutely. I've got a comment here from Tom, and I know Tom is a regular viewer of the show. He says, "This is a great show tonight. Thanks for bringing Scott and Grace's story to life." You're welcome, Tom. I wanted to talk to Scott for a long time. We were trying to line up this interview earlier, but we couldn't make it happen. So yes, Scott, thank you for sharing your and Grace's story with our viewers here.
You're very welcome.
Because I hope that people share this video and with their friends and families, and raise awareness. Scott, do you have, and maybe that's a question you don't want to answer, and that's okay too, but I'm curious to find out, do you have confidence in the legal process?
Not in the process, I don't have confidence, but I have we have a great legal team, so I have confidence in the team. I've been working with them for all the way since last September. We filed in April, so I've been working with them for almost about a year now. And so I'm very pleased with the team. The process, the reason I don't have confidence in the process is because I've read the state statutes, and the statutes, so for example, there's an informed consent statute. The informed consent statute has no consequences. In fact, the enforcement of the informed consent statute is turned over to the medical examining board, which is made up of 10 doctors and It's 13 people, 10 of which are doctors, 3 lay people. Okay, so now think through that. The people in the profession are going to be the judge and jury for their peers. So, I mean, they're never going to convict their peers. We just had a lady who's a professional pharmacist, one of the top 5 in the entire world. She submitted complaints, 100-page complaints on 4 of these characters in Grace's death to the medical examining board. Means nothing. They wouldn't even open a case.
Wow.
So, so I don't have any faith in the system, but I mean, I do have faith in God. And when we decided to jump into this, we told God that whatever doors you open, we'll walk through. And the lawsuit is a door that he opened. So we're walking through it. And, if God chooses to have us win this case, I mean, there's nobody that's going to stop it. That's for sure. No matter how corrupt the system is. But, we have the first jury trial in the entire country. So, I mean, that was a miracle. There's no question that was a miracle. It was that was July 14th when the judge granted that. It was the first day my wife and I actually celebrated since Grace's murder. So it was, that was fantastic. It was a miracle.
Right. I see. Okay. So it's almost like an exemplary trial that's happening here. Is that what you're saying?
Explain what you mean by that, Patrik.
Yeah. So I would have thought similar trials would have happened around the US or here in Australia or in the UK. Are you saying it's unique?
It's very unique. It's literally the first jury trial of a COVID hospital death in the United States. Very first one. There's only a handful of cases that have been filed because of the PrEP Act. So first, there's no money in these cases. The PrEP Act provided immunity from liability if you followed protocols. So nobody is taking cases to file in federal court. So this is a state court case. The reality is you have to have about $300,000 to hire an attorney to do the case. I mean, so you take the 1.2 million murders in the 39 months that I mentioned. Okay, so now I would say well over 1 million of those people don't even realize their loved one was murdered. They don't even have the records. Then on top of that, you have a statute of limitations. So, it's all against the citizen.
If I may ask, Scott, and again, I'm not sure whether you want to answer that question. What's the outcome that you are looking for from the trial?
That's a great question. The outcome is to stop the behavior. What I'd like to have happen is the people who did this to Grace, that they repent and then stop the behavior. So then this case is representative of what's going to happen to doctors. We filed not just against the hospital, we filed against 5 doctors and 2 nurses. And we wanted to make a statement that, that makes a much more expensive lawsuit, but we want to make a statement that doctors and nurses, you're going to be held to account. So we, by having that happen, it would stop. It has a chance to stop the behavior. That's the goal.
Yeah, no, I agree. But wouldn't there be an easier path, Scott, in terms of reporting the doctors and the nurses potentially to the relevant boards?
It's already been done. I did that, so on December 2nd of 2021, 2 months after Grace died, I filed a report against Dr. Schara, who ordered the med combination and the illegal DNR, and they rejected the request. And so now, like I said, on July 27th, this pharmacist filed 4 complaints against 3 doctors and 1 nurse in Grace's case. And each of the complaints she wrote was 100 pages each, and they rejected it. I mean, because it's they're, in short, they're all in on it. But just think about a medical examining board. If you're going to turn in a doctor and then a doctor is going to determine, these guys,
yeah, birds of a feather.
Correct. Exactly right.
Yeah, no, I get that. Okay. Scott, we're coming close to the hour mark. I do want to wrap this up in a minute. And I do want to thank you once again for sharing Grace's story with us. I'm sure it brings up some memories every single time you're sharing it publicly, but hopefully someone can take this story and prevent another situation in the future by being more awake.
That's the goal, Patrik, and
that's the goal.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing this with our audience, because I know the video will be watched probably hundreds of times in the next few days, and hopefully the story will spread and make people more aware. And every single time you go into a hospital with a loved one, be on high alert, ask questions, get access to the medical records, get an advocate on your side. What I keep saying over and over again is the biggest challenge for families in intensive care is that they don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
And they don't know what to look for. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know their rights.
That's correct.
And they don't know how to manage the team.
Yep. Right on, Patrik. Yeah, I mean, you're way ahead of the curve in I'm just a dad that learned this, but I mean, you're way ahead of the curve, and you're helping a lot of people with that advice, because it's spot on. I would like to just say, if people want to follow our story,
where can people find you? Yes,
they can. We have two websites. So we have the main website where all the research is posted and stories about Grace is ouramazinggrace.net. And that's an important website. But the one I would like everybody to go to is graceschara.com. Schara is Schara. And the reason is because at graceschara.com, it's a landing page. It's got a neat tribute to Grace, but we're asking people to sign up with their name and email. The reason is as this case proceeds, we're going to be creating some calls to action that are serious stuff. And, we got to be able to get a hold of people, so that it would be much appreciated as something tangible you can do is to go to graceschara.com and put in your name and email, and you'll get a nice thank you back from my daughter. My daughter Jessica runs that website, and that would help us tremendously. She sends out regular updates to that list also, so then you can follow the story and you'll be updated.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Scott, thank you so much once again to come on to my show. Maybe we can continue the conversation at some stage in the future. If you have any updates about the trial and whatnot, that would be appreciated. Now, if you have a loved one in intensive care, go to intensivecarehotline.com and contact us if you need help. We also have a membership for families of critically ill patients in intensive care at intensivecarehotline.com on our membership section. I also offer one-on-one consulting and advocacy for families in intensive care. I talk to intensive care teams directly. I represent you in family meetings with them. We also offer medical record reviews. And if you like my videos and my YouTube lives, please subscribe to my YouTube channel for regular updates. Share the video far and wide, and click the like button, click the notification bell, and comment below, what questions and insights you have and what topic you want me to cover next. Thanks again, Scott, and have a good night.
You too, Patrik. It's really a gift to have met you. I really appreciate you very much.
Likewise. Thank you so much. All the best.
All right.
Take care.